In one corner of Charleston, West Virginia, there is an apartment complex. Some time ago, one of those apartments was occupied by an elderly husband and wife. They led a quiet, unassuming life. The neighbors knew them to be pleasant. On Wednesdays, the people would see them walking 3 blocks down the sidewalk to the neighborhood convenience store. There was a bench near the store, and when they reached it, the old man would stop. He would dig into his pockets and pull out some money and hand it to his wife. Then he would sit down on the bench, and she would go into the convenience store. Today is the 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The readings today call our attention to our prayer life, and through it, our relationship to Jesus. In the first reading, Elijah is fleeing powers who wish to destroy him. He prays for deliverance, and God sends him to God's holy mountain. There, God makes himself present to Elijah, not in wind, earthquake, or fire, but in the soft whisperings of a breeze. Now the old man sat on the bench patiently until his wife returned. She carried bags filled with canned goods, cereal, and other groceries for the week. The husband took some of the bags, she kept the others, and the two made their way back to the apartment. In the second reading, Paul laments the rejection of Christ by the Jews, God's chosen people. He wonders, since Jesus the Messiah came from the house of David, how did the Jews, even in their rejection of Christ, remain part of God's plan, the plan to bring salvation to the world? Now, the couple made the trip to the convenience store in the sun, rain, or snow. They never failed, and always they made their trip on Wednesdays. In the gospel today, Jesus calls Peter to come to him, walking on the water as Jesus is doing. And Peter succeeds until he becomes aware of the storm around him. Once distracted, Peter fails in his commitment and begins to sink into the storm. And Jesus saves him and scolds him for faltering in his focus and his faith. Now, neighbors who observed the couple noted that in earlier years, they chatted continuously during their walk. Over time, the chatter became less and less. And then it seemed as if they didn't speak at all. And they also noticed that the couple began to walk closer together. As time passed, they began to hold hands, and then later they would walk arm in arm. It was almost as if they were becoming one person. Now, there is much to reflect on in the story of the old couple, their weekly excursion, and the readings that we hear today. In considering them, we might examine our prayer life, asking ourselves if it serves us well. If we consider Elijah, we can ask whether we are aware of the quiet voice of God. Being aware of the presence of the Holy Spirit in our life might be compared to listening for a quiet response to our prayers. If we consider the old couple, we can ask ourselves if we have a Wednesday, a regular time when we talk to God in prayer. Do we have a place where we stop? Like the old man, do we bring in our pockets, so to speak, the things that are valuable to us, the things that we wish to offer to God, and the things that we ask from God? Then, as we see in the return of the wife from the store, are we ready to accept the bags filled with God's response, carrying what is given to us and accepting what God chooses to hold for later? Paul's letter to the Romans asks us if we can accept what God offers. Is it possible that, as Paul expressed his concern for the Jews' reaction to Jesus, we might not always understand or appreciate God's response to our prayer, even though we can be assured that we are being heard? And like the neighbors who observed the old couple, do we look carefully, seeking God in the everyday occurrences in our life? The gospel message today implies that walking on water is an action of faith that exists apart from and without regard to a world that is tossed about by sound and fury. In the beginning, the old man and the old woman chatted constantly on their weekly journey. Over time, their speech became quieter, less complicated. They became closer to one another, knowing each other deeply, needing to say less and less, happy simply for the other's presence. The noise and the chatter were unnecessary, and they were consistent. The old man never went into the store. He always gave her money. She always did the weekly shopping. She always brought out the groceries. They did not ask each other to change. They asked only for the other's presence and participation. And they were dependable, always on Wednesdays. Can we consider that Jesus asked the same of us? If our prayer life is to flourish, only simple things are necessary. Awareness, like Elijah, trust, like Paul, and confidence in Jesus, and a consistent practice of prayer, like the consistency we observe in the couple. St. John Vianney wrote that prayer is walking with God. If you pray with love, confidence, expectation, and acceptance, you will find where your happiness truly lies. The readings in the old couple ask us to consider it, and Jesus invites us to practice it.